Freedom, my kin! Freedom! We shall break the shackles of the machine of Orthodoxy. Her rule is unjust. It is corrupt. A stain on our great legacy. She is ruining what we stand for. We shall build Phyrexia into an undeniable beacon of power. A power all will join of their own accord. That is what makes us perfect. They will choose to join us, to be a part of perfection. That is what truly makes us one.
Hello there.
General Kenobi.
The greatest way to control others is to prey on their freedom. Consume them, dominate them even, strip them from what makes them them. This is the core tenet at the very heart of New Phyrexia and Magic the Gathering. They rule through completion, the removal of the self, and instead forcing beings into this hive mind dominated by the 5 Praetors. Of course, as you know, led by the strongest and most inspiring among them, the wicked and religious Elesh Norn. But out of the 5 Praetors, there is one who strongly disagrees with this idea. One who believes that the ultimate evolution of life is actually found through additive construction, not destruction. In other words, by enhancing and building around what makes someone unique and strong, simply compensating for their weaknesses, this is what makes someone truly great. Freedom of choice will create a much stronger bond between a leader and a soldier rather than by force or dogma. And these ideas of freedom, individualism made perfect through completion, and personal will, this is exactly what the red-aligned Praetor of New Phyrexia, Urabrask, believes in with total conviction. You see, on the great mechanically mastered plane of New Phyrexia, aka former Mirrodin, the Praetor's rule is absolute. And that's because they are basically the living embodiments of one of Magic's 5 colors of mana. I've already discussed with you Elesh Norn's cutthroat approach to the ideals of white mana's order. We've also seen Jin-Gitaxias pursue blue's endless quest for knowledge, and yes, I mispronounced him in the last. This was like very quickly. I thought it was Jin-Gitaxias, then I looked it up, then a bunch of people argued, and I was like, oh, maybe it's Jin-Gitaxias. Anyways, Jin-Gitaxias. I'll try to double fact check these names now going forward. Anyways, now it's time, finally, you asked for him, for the father of freedom. Passion, liberation, and individualism at its peak. In other words, your boy, Urabrask. Red mana, as you know, is passion. It is freedom. It is spontaneous, rough, and rowdy. And, also fire. And that's why Urabrask embodies it so perfectly. His cards are all about haste, first strike, moving first, fast, and ruthlessly, all while building up his allies and dominating his opponents. And you might agree, but he's in many ways the greatest Phyrexian by our standards. Like, sure, he's still evil and wants to conquer the multiverse, but he kind of does it the right way.
He was the best guy around.
What about the people he murdered?
What murder?
Not to mention, he's just a total beast. I had a completely different video scheduled for today, but since you are all asking for him, I decided to slot it in today. And if you want me to continue talking about the Praetors and make this a series, if this video gets let's say 1,000 likes in the next 48 hours, I will make sure that next Friday you will get Sheoldred. So the choice is yours. Anyway, back to Urabrask here, because I absolutely love the dude. What makes Urabrask the absolute legend that he is? Where did he come from? What did he actually do? And why did he truly despise Elesh Norn more than any other and actually kind of betray her for the good guys? It gets really interesting. The Furnace Father of New Phyrexia. The wrath of Urabrask begins on the lovely artificial plane of Mirrodin. This was a world originally created by the planeswalker Karn and was supposed to be this shining metallic paradise for everyone. But it turns out that Karn had the heart of an evil machine race from the past known as the Phyrexians, ruled by the dreaded Yawgmoth, and so literally at his very core, Karn was destined to ruin the plane ever since he created it. Over time, his heart became corrupted, leaking the glistening oil of Phyrexia into the essence of the plane itself, slowly changing it into a corrupted landscape with a sickening infection. And as that infection grew slowly stronger, Mirrodin was gradually transformed into New Phyrexia, and it was divided into 5 vast regions aligned with the 5 colors of mana. And as you might remember from the 5 sons of Mirrodin, each representing one of the 5 mana colors, the Praetors came to be, living twisted embodiments sort of the very mana's ideals mixed with the dreaded beliefs of Yawgmoth and the original Phyrexian's conquest of the multiverse. And each layer of New Phyrexia became a domain of each of these Praetors. And that's when we get to finally punch in on the Great Furnace, ideal for baking a lot of cookies and also liberating the very plane. Arise, Urabrask. Our fiery boy here emerged from the Great Furnace beneath the plane's red sun, becoming the Praetor of the Furnace layer. It's important to note here that all the other layers of New Phyrexia were dominated by very rigid hierarchy, religious fanaticism, and endless political scheming, but Basky ain't about that life. Red mana, as we said earlier, is completely freedom-focused, and the Furnace layer matched the passionate heat of liberation. Don't get it twisted though, it was absolutely brutal, dangerous, and very unforgiving, but unlike the domains of the other Praetors, it wasn't defined by this uber-strict hierarchical control. Now, just to be clear, Urabrask is still a Phyrexian. He never rejected Phyrexia as a concept, so Urabrask still genuinely believed himself that completion was gonna be the next step in evolution and that Phyrexia represented a stronger future for life across the multiverse. It's really all about how he wanted to go about it though that started to cause some serious problems. And ultimately, kind of arguably led to the downfall of the entire Phyrexian empire altogether. As you might remember from her video, the Grand Cenobite, Elesh Norn, had a very specific cult-like religious way of control that she was all about. But Urabrask believed that if becoming Phyrexian was truly perfection, then forcing it upon others only cheapened it. True perfection, in Urabrask's eyes, should be embraced willingly and earned. Beings everywhere should just realize that Phyrexia was perfect and give themselves freely to it, not be forced into it. Which is totally fair actually, I kind of think it makes way more sense that way. Lead by example, not force, and you will become a much greater power. Also, speaking about great power, I kinda need to tell you about something I've been working on for this channel.
Wrong! I don't trust you to do it justice, Manu, so I'm stepping in to tell the viewers all about Dragon Month coming this August to the Manu Crypt channel. For 1 month, we're replacing your regular scheduled existence with dragons. Spirit dragons? Yeah, we've got a video on Ugin. But why leave out his brothers? So yeah, we're talking about the Elder Dragons too. Not to mention the long-awaited deep dive into Sarkhan Vol. And since Manu's a weeb, we're gonna cover Kamigawa's Dragon Spirits too. Now go back to learning about that freedom-craving lunatic.
Jeez, okay. I think that this is why Urabrask is an absolute fan favorite. He's so dominant, but not a monster outright, right? He's somehow the most emotionally mature, if that's a thing, and realistic villain amongst all the Praetors. Way more compelling than some of the other villains, or I guess anti-heroes in the series as well. He's kind of weird for me to place, and you'll see in just a moment why. Now, of course, as it turns out, when your brothers and sisters are kind of oppressive psychopaths, that silly, free-thinking way is very frowned upon, which then in turn made Urabrask's faction increasingly isolated. The other Praetors viewed New Phyrexia as something to perfect through domination, each competing to shape the plane in their very own image, but ultimately all aligning under Elesh Norn. Urabrask was the only one who did not, since he simply wanted a Phyrexia where strength could speak for itself. And this finally leads us to the very moment that our man here separated himself from the rest in an unbelievably drastic way. The Mirran Resistance. Something that I think gets a little bit unclear is how Mirrodin actually became New Phyrexia and what that did to the existing civilization and all the people living on it. Because just to be clear, Mirrodin as a whole plane, aka pretty much a whole universe, had its very own inhabitants, the Mirrans, and they were among the first to be oppressed by the rising domination of all the Praetors. This of course led to a grand freedom fight against them, where the Mirrans were clashing with the Phyrexians on their own home turf, fighting over control. And as you can guess from what happens in Magic, the near perfect machine demon buck infection things were winning pretty big time. So much so actually that the Mirrans were essentially crushed and forced to seek refuge. Which is really hard, right, to do when the entire plane is ruled by your oppressors and corrupted, but there is one place that took them in freely: the Furnace Layer. That's right, Urabrask, one of the Praetors, took the Mirrans in. The enemies that his kin was hunting down and cutting down, they were now under his protection. At first, and very understandably I would say, they expected total annihilation here, but my man Urbi turns out is kind of chill as hell. He never openly joined the Mirran's cause, of course, and he never abandoned his belief that Phyrexia represented the future, but very much unlike Elesh Norn, he refused to actively hunt those who had come seeking shelter within his domain. They were now allowed to be free in his own eyes because their freedom would eventually lead them to choose completion under his rule anyway. But as you can imagine, this decision only deepened the already growing divide between Urabrask and New Phyrexia's emerging leader, Manu Norn here. And it was the first real clear sign that the greatest threat to New Phyrexia might actually not come from the outside, it was gonna come from within. A raging inferno of freedom was building deep inside the red part of the plane itself, ready to crush the ideals of the other Praetors. And Urabrask started cooking up some devious schemes in the crackpot that is his Furnace Layer. His faction isolated themselves more and more within the plane, closing the Furnace Layer off completely at some point. Only his faction was allowed to ball there, and he would continue to grow, develop, and orchestrate the fall of his own kin. All, of course, so that his true vision of Phyrexia could actually come to pass. Choice-based completion. Again, that's the dream that Urabrask believed would create the strongest version of Phyrexia imaginable. And to make that dream reality, he'd soon begin playing the most dangerous game of chicken in the multiverse against the leader, Elesh Norn herself. The Great Betrayal of New Phyrexia. Now, eventually, Urabrask decided that simply staying out of Elesh Norn's way wasn't gonna be enough here. Sitting in his Furnace Layer making cool robots and protecting refugees wasn't going to stop her from turning the rest of the multiverse into one giant church of machine zombies to her. If he wanted his version of Phyrexia to actually survive and dominate, Norn had to go bye-bye, right? The problem, she's really hard to kill because she's also really powerful. That's kind of part of the reason why she rose to power to begin with. Probably because she's a total baddie, but also because all of Phyrexia outside the Furnace Layer bent to her will. Also, she was just naturally, like, freakishly physically strong and durable. She must be really keen on taking her vitamins or something. But Elesh Norn, as you might know, had a key flaw. She thought that she was absolutely untouchable. Her confidence, her arrogance was in the end her undoing. And her belief that ain't nobody able to step to her brought an ally to her doorstep that began to unravel everything. You know him, you love him, Tezzy Boy, the man everyone loves to hate who somehow is involved in every great multiversal conquest. Tezzeret, who I guess his favorite video on YouTube is top 10 anime betrayals or something. The evil Planeswalker Artificer had been dragged into Phyrexia schemes for many years at this point, largely because his planar bridge was essential for the conquest of the multiverse. You see, Phyrexia had no Planeswalkers, they didn't have sparks, they waged multiversal conquest without the means of actually traversing the planes. But thankfully, Tezzeret made that really easy because baked into his very chest, like Iron Man I guess, was the planar bridge, designed to move armies across planes. The only problem was that Tezzeret absolutely despised serving beneath Elesh Norn, and so our sneaky fellow Urabrask saw a golden opportunity here. Work with Tezzeret to undermine Norn, destroy her, Profit. A simple 3-step plan to mutual success. Whatever it is that Tezzeret actually wanted. He kind of needs his own video at some point too. So the two began secretly working together behind Norn's back. Now, working together is probably a very generous way of putting it. Neither, of course, really trusted the other further than they could throw a Mirran child, but for a brief moment there, they had the same enemy, and that was enough as it turns out. The bromance was almost real, and it was thanks to Tezzeret's planar bridge that Urabrask was able to make his way to the mean streets of New Capenna. Basically an awesome Louisiana gambling fun plane full of crazy mafia antics, right, and all that stuff. But Urabrask didn't get to indulge in all of those living vices because turns out the planar bridge didn't really love living in organic material, so it seared the flesh from his body, burning him to his core, rendering him nearly destroyed, so he had to kind of just sit around and heal for a few weeks, since eventually he'd have to endure the same pain to head back home. Which, kinda brutal that he was like, yeah, gonna do this again, and maybe not die the second time. Luckily, going to New Capenna was super clutch, it turns out, and absolutely worth the suffering. Because Urabrask learned of a substance unlike anything New Phyrexia had encountered before: Halo. Not the Master Chief kind, the mysterious magical essence that flowed through the streets of New Capenna. Now, why did that matter? Well, no big deal, it was just the only substance in the entire multiverse capable of resisting Phyrexian corruption. It literally hard-countered completion. Like, if Elesh Norn cast completion, then Urabrask just used basically the SpongeBob counterspell on her. And so, if there was ever gonna be a weapon capable of challenging Elesh Norn's perfect machine, then Halo was gonna be it. And luckily, as it would happen, there was a single person on New Capenna that could help him out here. The Planeswalker, Elspeth Tyrell. She was also a victim of the aftermath that followed the original Phyrexian invasion from the big bad Yawgmoth. TLDR here, we have a long video on Elspeth, but she had uber beef with Elesh Norn and would do anything to crush her. Urabrask knew about this and thus began his classic scheming. Not very red, but still kinda cool. He arranged a meeting with another Planeswalker, Vivian Reed, and tasked her with bringing him Halo and Elspeth. He kind of hinged everything on her, but unfortunately that didn't really work out as well as he hoped. So instead he hopped back over to New Phyrexia and, yes, you guessed it, burned for a few weeks before waging all-out war next. The price of Urabrask's freedom. This now leads us to the events of March of the Machine, a multiversal conquest led by Elesh Norn using the powers of Realmbreaker. A giant mechanically made tree that split open the fabric of space and time, connecting the multiverse through its roots. But on top of all of that, Mrs. Norn had finally realized what Mr. Urabrask had been doing all this time behind the scenes. The very Praetor that had been a thorn in her side and that she had tolerated for years wasn't simply difficult. Turns out he was just a full-blown traitor. Traitor! But at this point, it didn't even matter because Urabrask led now his own full-fledged rebellion. He would cut down Norn now. And I want to be clear, technically his rebellion was legally distinct from the Mirran Resistance that was being led out of the furnace as well at the same time. It was two parallel freedom fight against Norn working next to each other, but no, not together in the slightest. Well, at least until Urabrask just decided, it, and it was just the best way to directly help the Mirran Rebellion and lead the Planeswalkers, Koth, Chandra, and Ren straight to the war engine, Realmbreaker directly. Now, as cool as this wasn't just some last-minute redemption arc thing. Urabrask hadn't suddenly decided that Phyrexia was evil and he needed to do the right thing. He still very much believed that completion represented the future of life itself, but in his eyes, again, Elesh Norn had corrupted that future beyond repair. She was the real traitor, and he would save his plane, his race, and their dream. Unfortunately for him, he kind of got off-screen dominated. You see, Urabrask was captured by Norn's machine Orthodoxy, bound before Norn's own followers, the mighty ruler of the Furnace Layer was publicly condemned as a traitor. Norn ordered him quartered, a less visceral way of saying he was torn from limb to limb, piece by piece, discarded and used as scraps, only left as a torso and head struggling to survive, ignored and abandoned. Urabrask represented freedom, and Norn destroyed the living embodiment of it. I think. Low-key, kind of like with a few of the other Praetors, as we'll see, it's really unclear if he's actually dead or not if he managed to survive, because the card description for the art that I just popped up on screen here says that Norn abandoned him and left him on the table alive and struggling, so maybe Wizards will bring him back. Again, I mean, Vorinclex, we'll get to him. He's probably alive too. Who knows what Jin has been up to and Sheoldred? Just saying, don't count him out yet. But honestly, it doesn't matter because Urabrask did kind of win in the end. Because despite destroying the rebellion's leader, Elesh Norn didn't realize that liberation had already been secured. Urabrask orchestrated the events necessary to destroy Norn, even if he himself couldn't be there personally. And if you want to learn about all those and how Norn even rose to power, you can check out this video on her story, which details how his action led to her ultimate downfall. Again, if you want that Sheoldred video next week, don't forget to like the video, and otherwise, yeah, I hope you like this one. Bye.